Never tell people what you do. Focus in silence. Win in public. You posted it on Instagram. Starting my fitness journey, time to finally get serious about my health. Who's with me? Within minutes, the likes started rolling in. Comments appeared. You got this. So proud of you. Can't wait to see your transformation. You felt it. That rush, that validation, that surge of motivation. Your brain lit up like you'd already achieved something. You felt seen, supported, accountable. 3 weeks later, you've been to the gym twice. The post is still there. The likes are still there. But the motivation? Gone. The accountability you thought you'd created by announcing your goal publicly, it evaporated the moment the dopamine from those notifications wore off. You meant it when you posted. You were excited. You genuinely thought that sharing would help you stay committed, but it didn't. It did the opposite. And now you're stuck in that familiar cycle. Announce a goal, get excited about the announcement, lose momentum, feel like a failure, wait a few months, announce a new goal. Meanwhile, she exists. The woman who transforms in silence. You know her. You've watched her change, seemingly overnight. 6 months ago, she looked one way. Today, she's completely different. Physically stronger, professionally elevated, personally transformed, and you never saw it coming. Because she never announced it. She didn't post about starting her fitness journey. She didn't share her new business idea. She didn't update everyone about her personal development work. She just did it quietly, consistently, without needing anyone to witness her process. And now everyone's asking, when did this happen? What's your secret? But there is no secret. There's just silence. Strategic, protective, powerful silence. While you were posting about your plans, she was executing hers. While you were explaining your vision to people who weren't even working on their own, she was building. While you were seeking validation for your goals, she was achieving them. Same opportunities, same 24 hours, different approach, completely different results. She's not more disciplined than you. She's not more talented. She doesn't have some special willpower you lack. She just understands something you're about to learn. Announcing your goals kills your ability to achieve them. The science you need to know, this isn't about being secretive or antisocial. This is neuroscience. NYU researchers studying goal achievement made a discovery that changes everything. When you announce a goal, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurochemical reward you get from actually achieving the goal. Read that again. Your brain gives you the same reward for talking about success as it does for achieving success. This is why announcing feels so good. Your brain thinks you've already done something. The motivation to actually do the work disappears because as far as your brain is concerned, you already got your reward. The researchers found that people who announced their goals publicly were 33% less likely to achieve them than people who kept their goals private. 33%. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between transformation and staying exactly where you are. Every time you post about your gym membership, your brain rewards you as if you've already worked out. Every time you tell people about your business idea, your brain gives you credit as if you've already built something. Every time you share your reading list, your brain feels accomplished as if you've already gained the knowledge. And then the actual work, the hard, boring, daily grind that creates real results, becomes less appealing because you already got your reward. Why would your brain want to do the work when it already feels like it's won? This is the announcement trap, and you've been caught in it every time you shared a goal before you'd built the discipline to achieve it. The cost of constant sharing. But the damage goes deeper than just lost motivation. Every goal you announce is energy you're leaking. Every plan you explain is focus you're draining. Every vision you share prematurely is momentum you're killing. Think about how much time you spend talking about what you're going to do, posting about it, explaining it, defending it when people question it, updating everyone on your progress, justifying why you're not further along. That's time. That's energy. That's mental bandwidth. And all of it could have been spent actually doing the thing instead of performing the thing. You become a storyteller instead of a builder, a performer instead of a producer, someone who looks busy working but isn't actually making progress. Then there's the external accountability problem. You think announcing your goals creates accountability. It doesn't. It creates pressure. External accountability, the kind where other people are checking on you, asking about your progress, reminding you what you said you'd do, is fragile. It's based on not wanting to look bad, not wanting to disappoint, not wanting to seem like you failed. That kind of accountability lasts as long as people are paying attention, and people stop paying attention fast. Then you're left with the goal, but no internal commitment to it, because you never built that. You outsourced your accountability to others instead of developing it within yourself. Stanford research on motivation confirms this. External validation creates fragile, inconsistent drive. Internal standards create unshakable commitment. When your motivation depends on likes, comments, and other people's approval, it disappears the moment that approval fades, and it always fades. But when your motivation comes from internal commitment, from keeping promises to yourself, from measuring against your own standard, from knowing what you're building even when no one else sees it, that's the motivation that lasts. The announcement addiction. Here's what most people don't realize. They're addicted to the announcement itself, not to the goal, not to the work, to the feeling of announcing, the moment of posting, the rush of notifications, the validation of comments, the brief spotlight of attention. That's what feels good. That's what you're actually chasing, not the transformation, the announcement of the transformation. And your brain knows it. So every time you have a new goal, a new idea, a new plan, your brain immediately wants to share it. Not to increase accountability, to get that hit of dopamine. You convince yourself you're sharing to stay accountable. But really, you're sharing because announcing feels like progress without requiring effort. And the more you feed this pattern, announce, get validation, lose motivation, repeat, the stronger it becomes. Your brain gets trained to seek the reward of sharing instead of the reward of achieving. This is why some people are constantly starting new things, but never finishing anything. They're addicted to the announcement, the beginning, the potential, the idea of transformation. But transformation doesn't happen in the announcement. It happens in the silent, unglamorous daily work that nobody sees. The protection of silence. Silence protects your process in ways you don't even realize. When you keep your goals private, you're protected from opinions, from doubts, from well-meaning advice that's actually based on other people's limitations, not your potential. You're protected from comparisons, from people watching to see if you fail, from the pressure of performing your progress instead of just making progress. You're protected from interference, from people who will question your methods, challenge your timeline, or project their own fears onto your vision. Silence creates a protected space where you can focus, where you can make mistakes without an audience, where you can adjust your approach without having to explain yourself, where you can build something real without the noise of everyone else's input. The woman who transforms in silence isn't hiding. She's protecting her energy, her focus, her vision, her momentum. She knows that not everyone deserves access to her dreams, that not everyone can handle her ambition, that some goals need privacy to grow. And she's learned that the best work The work that actually changes your life happens when nobody's watching, when there's no pressure to perform, when the only person you're accountable to is yourself. The promise. Over the next 2 hours, you're going to learn exactly how to break free from the announcement trap, why your brain rewards you for talking instead of doing, and how to redirect that reward system, how to build internal accountability that doesn't need external validation to stay strong, why silence protects your process, your energy, and your results in ways that sharing never could. How to develop the discipline to work when nobody's watching, nobody's cheering, and nobody knows what you're building. Why the compound effect works best in silence. Small, consistent actions nobody sees creating results nobody can ignore. How to let your results do all the talking your mouth doesn't need to do. This isn't about being secretive. It's about being strategic. It's about understanding that your brain is wired to reward announcements, and you need to outsmart that wiring if you want actual results. It's about recognizing that every ounce of energy you spend explaining your vision is energy you're not spending building it. It's about learning to trust yourself enough that you don't need external validation to keep going. And it's about becoming the woman who doesn't need to announce her transformation because her transformation announces itself. 6 months from now, when you've actually achieved what you used to announce and abandon, people will ask how you did it, and you'll smile because you know the answer. You stopped talking, you started working, you protected your process with silence, and you let your results speak when they were ready. Never tell people what you do. Focus in silence, win in public. That's not a strategy. That's how real transformation happens. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why announcing kills your momentum. The dopamine trap. You think sharing your goals creates accountability. It doesn't. It creates the illusion of progress while killing your actual ability to make progress. This isn't opinion. This is neuroscience. And once you understand what's happening in your brain, the moment you announce a goal, you'll never look at sharing the same way again. The announcement addiction. Here's what happens in your brain when you post that goal on Instagram, share it in your group chat, or announce it at dinner. The moment you hit post or say the words out loud, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is your brain's reward chemical. It's what makes you feel good. It's what reinforces behaviors. It's what tells your brain, this is worth doing again. And here's the problem. Your brain releases dopamine when you announce a goal for the same reason it releases dopamine when you achieve a goal. Your brain doesn't distinguish between talking about success and actually succeeding. To your brain, the announcement feels like accomplishment. NYU researchers studied this phenomenon and found something that should fundamentally change how you approach your goals. People who announced their goals publicly were 33% less likely to achieve them compared to people who kept their goals private. 33%. That's not a small margin. That's the difference between transformation and stagnation, between actually changing your life and staying exactly where you are while thinking you're making progress. Why? Because the announcement gave your brain the reward it was seeking. You got your dopamine hit. The neurochemical payoff happened. And now your brain has less motivation to do the actual work because it already got what it wanted. The feeling of accomplishment. This is the announcement addiction. You're not addicted to achieving goals. You're addicted to the feeling of announcing them. The rush of hitting post. The notifications lighting up your phone. The comments rolling in, the validation of people saying, you got this and so proud of you. That feels amazing. And your brain wants more of it. So the next time you have a goal, your brain's first instinct isn't, let's make a plan and get to work. It's, let's share this and get that dopamine hit again. You tell yourself you're sharing for accountability. But really, you're sharing for the chemical reward. And that reward is sabotaging your ability to actually follow through. The energy leak. But the damage goes beyond just brain chemistry. Every time you announce a goal, you're leaking energy that should be going into achieving it. Think about how much time and mental bandwidth you spend on the announcement itself, crafting the post, choosing the right words, picking the perfect photo, hitting publish, checking for likes, reading comments, responding to people, explaining your plan when they ask questions, defending your choice when they're skeptical, updating everyone on your progress, or making excuses when there isn't any progress to share. That's hours of energy, hours of mental focus, hours of emotional investment, and none of it moves you toward your goal. All of it is performance. None of it is production. When you talk to 10 people about your goal, that's 10 conversations worth of energy you spent explaining instead of executing. 10 times you rehearsed your vision out loud instead of taking action on it. 10 opportunities to lose clarity because each person had a different opinion, a different question, a different concern. Columbia University research on motivation found that internal accountability, the kind where you make a commitment to yourself and measure your progress privately, is 47% more sustainable than external accountability, where others are tracking your progress. 47% more sustainable. Because when your accountability is internal, you're not wasting energy managing other people's expectations, opinions, or judgments. You're using that energy to actually do the work. External accountability sounds good in theory. If I tell people, I'll have to follow through because I won't want to look bad. But that's pressure, not motivation, and pressure creates fragile commitment. What happens when people stop asking about your goal, when the comments slow down, when nobody's checking in anymore? Your accountability disappears because it was never actually yours. It was borrowed, and borrowed accountability doesn't last. Meanwhile, the woman who keeps her goals private, her accountability is internal. She doesn't need anyone to check on her because she's made a promise to herself. And that promise is stronger than any comment section ever could be. The premature celebration. Here's another way announcing kills momentum. It makes you celebrate before you've done anything worth celebrating. The moment you share your goal and people respond with encouragement, your brain interprets that as success. You feel accomplished. You feel like you've already started making progress, but you haven't. You've just talked about making progress, and your brain can't tell the difference. So now you're celebrating the announcement instead of the achievement. You're getting congratulated for the intention instead of the result. And that feels so good that the actual work, the hard, boring, daily grind that creates real results, becomes less appealing. Why would you want to do the difficult thing when you already got the reward for the easy thing? This is why so many people are constantly starting new goals, but never finishing anything. They're addicted to the beginning, to the announcement, to the potential. The fresh start feels exciting, the new plan feels motivating, the vision feels inspiring, and sharing it feels like progress. But starting isn't the same as sustaining, announcing isn't the same as achieving, and the dopamine from potential isn't the same as the satisfaction from actual results. You see this pattern everywhere. The person who announces a new diet every few months but never loses weight. The entrepreneur who talks about 10 different business ideas but never builds one. The aspiring author who tells everyone they're writing a book but never finishes a manuscript. They're not lazy. They're not lacking ideas. They're caught in the premature celebration trap. They're getting their reward too early, and it's killing their ability to follow through. The storyteller versus the builder. When you announce your goals, you train yourself to become a storyteller instead of a builder. A storyteller focuses on the narrative, how it sounds, how it looks, how people react to it. A builder focuses on the work, what needs to be done, how to do it, whether it's actually getting done. Storytellers spend their energy explaining. Builders spend their energy executing. Storytellers need an audience. Builders need a plan. Storytellers feel productive when they're talking about their vision. Builders feel productive when they're making measurable progress. And here's the critical difference. Storytellers measure their success by how many people know about their goals. Builders measure their success by whether they're actually achieving them. Every time you choose to announce instead of act, you're training your brain to be a storyteller. You're reinforcing the pattern of talking over doing. You're teaching yourself that sharing is more important than building. And over time, that pattern becomes automatic. You stop thinking, what's the next step I need to take? And start thinking, how should I update everyone about this? You become someone who's great at talking about change, but never actually changes. Someone who always has a new goal, but never has new results. Someone who's busy performing progress, but never producing it. She stays silent. Meanwhile, she's doing the opposite of everything you've been doing. When she decides to get serious about her fitness, she doesn't post about it. She just joins the gym and starts showing up. When she has a business idea, she doesn't announce it to her friends. She quietly researches, plans, and begins building. When she sets a personal development goal, she doesn't share it on social media. She buys the books, does the work, and lets the transformation speak for itself. She's not being secretive. She's being strategic. She understands that her energy is limited, and every ounce of energy spent talking about what she's building is energy she's not spending actually building it. She knows that her motivation needs to be internal, that if she bases her commitment on other people's reactions, her commitment will be as inconsistent as their attention. She's learned that announcing creates pressure, not accountability, and pressure makes her second-guess herself, while internal commitment makes her trust herself. So she stays quiet, not forever, just until there's something real to show. She works in private, builds in silence, focuses without the noise of everyone else's opinions, questions, and expectations. And 6 months later, when the results are undeniable, people notice. They ask when it happened. They wonder how she did it, but she doesn't need to explain because the results explain themselves. The bottom line. Your brain gives you the same dopamine reward for announcing a goal as it does for achieving it. This is why announcing kills motivation. You've already gotten your reward without doing the work. Every goal you announce is energy you're leaking. Energy that could be spent executing is instead spent explaining, defending, and updating. External accountability is fragile. It depends on other people's attention, which fades. Internal accountability is sustainable. It depends on your commitment to yourself, which can grow. Premature celebration trains your brain to seek the reward of potential instead of the satisfaction of results. You become addicted to starting, not finishing. Announcing makes you a storyteller. Silence makes you a builder. And builders create results that storytellers only talk about. Stop giving your brain a reward for talking. Save the dopamine for achieving. Stop leaking energy through explanations. Redirect it into execution. Stop performing your progress. Start producing it. The momentum you think you're creating by announcing, you're actually killing it. Real momentum builds in silence. It compounds when nobody's watching. It becomes unstoppable when you stop needing validation and start trusting yourself. Never tell people what you do. Focus in silence. Win in public. That's not just a strategy. That's how you actually achieve the goals you keep announcing and abandoning. Chapter 2: The Power of Private Execution. Building where nobody's watching. There's a different kind of power that grows when you work in silence. Not the power of being seen, but the power of being focused. Not the power of approval, but the power of autonomy. Not the power of validation, but the power of results. This is the power of private execution, and it changes everything. When you decide to build something without announcing it, without sharing it, without performing it for an audience, you're not just protecting your goal, you're protecting something far more valuable: your ability to think clearly, work effectively, and trust yourself completely. Silence protects your process. The moment you share a goal, you open it up to interference. Not always intentional interference, not always malicious, but interference nonetheless. Opinions, questions, concerns, suggestions. Have you thought about, my friend tried that and, are you sure you should? What if it doesn't work? Every single one of these inputs, even the well-meaning ones, creates noise in your head. Noise you now have to filter through. Noise that takes up mental bandwidth. Noise that dilutes your clarity. You had a clear vision before you shared it. You knew exactly what you wanted to do and why. But now you're second-guessing, wondering if you should adjust your approach based on what they said, questioning whether your original plan was good enough. This is what happens when you let other people into your process too early. You trade your clarity for their confusion, your direction for their doubt, your vision for their limitations. Because here's the truth: most people's advice is based on their own fears, not your potential. Their own experiences, not your circumstances. Their own limitations, not your capabilities. When they say that's hard, they mean it's hard for them. When they say that might not work, they mean they couldn't make it work. When they say be realistic, they mean be limited like them. And if you're not careful, you'll absorb their perspective. You'll start seeing your goal through their lens instead of your own. You'll adjust your plans to match their comfort instead of your ambition. But when you keep your goal private, none of that happens. No opinions to filter through, no concerns to address, no well-meaning advice that's actually based on someone else's fear, just you and the work, your vision and your execution. Your clarity and your focus, that's protected space. And protected space is where real progress happens. Internal versus external accountability. Let's talk about why you really want to announce your goals. Not the reason you tell yourself, the real reason: you think it's for accountability, but it's actually for pressure. You believe that if other people know about your goal, you'll have to follow through because you won't want to look bad. You won't want them to think you failed. You won't want to face the embarrassment of not doing what you said you'd do. That's external accountability. And it's fundamentally different from internal accountability. External accountability asks, what will they think if I don't do this? Internal accountability asks, what will I think of myself if I don't do this? External accountability is based on avoiding shame. Internal accountability is based on building integrity. External accountability depends on other people's attention. Internal accountability depends on your commitment to yourself. And here's why internal accountability is stronger. External accountability only works as long as people are watching. The moment their attention fades, and it always fades, your motivation disappears. they stop asking about it, they move on to their own lives. And suddenly, you have no reason to keep going. But internal accountability doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need someone checking on you. It doesn't need reminders or questions or external pressure. It just needs you to care about keeping promises to yourself. Columbia University research found that people who tracked their progress privately and held themselves accountable internally were 47% more likely to sustain their behavior change long term compared to those who relied on external accountability. 47% more likely to actually sustain the change. Not just start it, not just talk about it, actually maintain it. Because when your accountability is internal, you're building self-respect. Every time you do what you said you'd do, even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching, you're proving to yourself that you can trust yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation of your discipline. It becomes the reason you keep going when things get hard. It becomes the source of your strength when motivation fades. You don't need external pressure when you have internal commitment. And you can't build internal commitment if you're always outsourcing your accountability to others. The unseen work compounds. Here's what nobody tells you about transformation. The most important work is the work nobody sees. Not the dramatic before and after photos, not the big milestones, not the impressive achievements, the daily effort, the small choices, the unsexy consistency, going to the gym at 6 a.m. when it's cold and dark and you're tired, saying no to the dinner invitation because you have work to do on your business, reading for 30 minutes every night instead of scrolling, meal prepping on Sunday instead of sleeping in, choosing the hard conversation instead of avoiding it. These aren't Instagram moments. These aren't things worth announcing. They're small. They're boring. They don't look impressive to anyone else. But they compound. One early morning workout doesn't transform your body, but 100 of them do. One focused work session doesn't build a business, but 180 of them do. One book doesn't change your mindset, but 20 of them do. The compound effect only works in silence. Because compound growth is slow, it's invisible at first. It doesn't look like progress to anyone watching. If you're announcing every step, you're looking for validation at every stage. And when the validation doesn't come, because the progress is too small to be impressive yet, you lose motivation. But when you're working privately, you don't need each step to be impressive. You just need it to be done. You're not performing progress, you're accumulating it, and those accumulated small efforts, done consistently over time, create results that are undeniable. Nobody sees the 100 gym sessions, they just see you 6 months later looking completely different. Nobody sees the 180 work sessions, they just see you launching a successful business. Nobody sees the 20 books, they just see you speaking with a depth and wisdom you didn't have before. The work compounds in silence, and when it's ready, it reveals itself. Privacy as competitive advantage. Here's something most people don't consider. Keeping your goals private isn't just good for your psychology, it's good for your strategy. When people don't know what you're building, they can't copy it, they can't interfere with it, they can't get ahead of you. You have time to develop your ideas without someone else running with a similar concept. You have space to refine your approach without someone critiquing it before it's ready. You have the advantage of surprise. By the time people realize what you've been working on, you're already miles ahead. You've already built momentum they can't catch. You've already figured out things they're just starting to think about. This is why the most successful people often seem to appear out of nowhere. They didn't appear out of nowhere. They were building in private the entire time. They just didn't announce it until they had something undeniable to show. Think about it. She didn't tell anyone she was training for a marathon. She just ran. Every morning, for months, building endurance, strengthening her body, developing discipline. Then one day she casually mentions she ran 26.2 miles, and everyone's shocked. When did you become a runner? She didn't become a runner, she was a runner. She just didn't announce it until she'd actually done it. That's the competitive advantage of privacy. While everyone else is talking about what they're going to do, you're doing it. And by the time they realize you're in the race, you've already crossed the finish line. The protection of not explaining, there's a specific kind of energy drain that comes from constantly having to explain yourself. Why you're making this choice, why you're doing it this way, why you believe it will work, why you're prioritizing this over that. Every explanation is energy that could be going into actually doing the thing instead of defending your choice to do it. And the more you explain, the more you have to keep explaining. Because people don't just ask once, they check in, they follow up, they want updates. How's that goal going? Did you stick with it? Have you made progress? And now you're managing their expectations along with your own. You're performing progress for them even when you're just trying to make progress for yourself. When you work in private, you don't owe anyone explanations. You don't have to justify your methods. You don't have to defend your timeline. You don't have to update anyone on your progress. You're free to adjust your approach without having to explain why. Free to take longer than you thought without feeling like you're disappointing people. Free to make mistakes without an audience watching. That freedom is where experimentation happens, where learning happens, where real growth happens, because you're not trying to look like you know what you're doing. You're actually figuring out what you're doing, and that process is messy. It requires trial and error. It requires being wrong sometimes, but you can be wrong in private. You can learn in private. You can adjust in private. And then, when you've figured it out, when you've built something real, you can share the result, not the messy process, just the clean outcome. The bottom line: silence protects your process from interference, from opinions, doubts, and well-meaning advice that's actually based on other people's limitations. Internal accountability is 47% more sustainable than external accountability. When you stop needing people to check on you and start keeping promises to yourself, your discipline becomes unshakable. The most important work is the work nobody sees. Small, daily, unsexy consistency compounds into results that shock everyone except you. Privacy is a competitive advantage. While they're talking about what they're going to do, you're doing it. And by the time they notice, you're already winning. Not having to explain yourself protects your energy. Every explanation is energy you're not spending on execution. The best work happens in silence, not because you're hiding, because you're focused. Build where nobody's watching, work without an audience, create without commentary. And when the results speak, they'll speak louder than any announcement ever could. Chapter 3. Stop performing, start producing. The performance trap. You're not working on your goals. You're performing them. There's a difference. A massive, life-altering difference that determines whether you actually transform or just look like you're trying to. Performing is for an audience. Producing is for results. Performing is about being seen. Producing is about getting better. Performing drains your energy into image management. Producing channels your energy into actual progress. And if you're honest with yourself, you know which one you've been doing. Performing vias producing. Performing looks like this. You post the gym selfie, but skip tomorrow's workout. You share the business book you're reading, but never implement what you learned. You update your LinkedIn with entrepreneur, but haven't made a single sale. You photograph your healthy meal, but order takeout the rest of the week. You announce your morning routine but hit snooze every other day. Performing is the appearance of effort without the actual work. It's curating an image of who you want to be instead of doing the uncomfortable things that would actually make you that person. Producing looks different. No gym selfie, just consistent training even when you don't feel like it. No book posts, just implemented strategies that improve your actual results. No announcement, just quietly building a business until it's profitable enough to speak for itself. No food photos, just meal after meal of choices that align with your goals, witnessed by no one. No routine updates, just waking up early day after day because you committed to yourself, not to your followers. Producing is the actual work, the unsexy, unposted, unglamorous daily effort that creates real change. And here's the brutal truth: you can't do both effectively. Energy spent on performance is energy not spent on production. Time curating your image is time not spent improving your skills. Mental bandwidth managing your online presence is bandwidth not available for solving actual problems. You have to choose. Look like you're working or actually work. Perform progress or produce it. The validation addiction. Let's talk about why performing feels so good. It's not because you're vain, it's because you're human, and humans are wired to seek social approval. Stanford researchers studying motivation found that external validation, likes, comments, praise from others, triggers the same reward centers in your brain as actual achievement. This is why checking your phone after posting feels so satisfying. Why refreshing to see new likes gives you that little hit of pleasure. Why reading encouraging comments makes you feel accomplished. Your brain is getting a reward, the same type of reward it would get from actually doing something difficult and succeeding. But here's the trap. The more you feed on external validation, the more you need it to feel motivated. You start basing your sense of progress on how many people noticed, not on whether you actually improved. You start measuring success by engagement metrics instead of real metrics. You start feeling accomplished when people praise your effort instead of when you see tangible results. And slowly, without realizing it, you become dependent on that external validation to keep going. You need the likes to feel motivated. You need the comments to feel on track. You need the attention to feel like what you're doing matters. This is fragile motivation. It lasts as long as the attention does. And attention is fleeting. One week people are commenting on your posts, the next week they're busy with their own lives. And suddenly you feel like you've lost momentum, not because you stopped making progress, but because people stopped noticing. But when you produce instead of perform, your motivation comes from a different source: competence. You feel accomplished when you lift heavier than last week, when you close a deal you couldn't have closed a month ago, when you handle a situation with more composure than you would have before. That's intrinsic motivation, based on actual capability growth, not social approval. And that kind of motivation doesn't disappear when people stop paying attention, because it was never about them in the first place. She doesn't perform. Meanwhile, she's not on social media documenting her journey. She's not posting workout selfies or sharing her wins. Not because she's modest, not because she doesn't have things worth sharing, because she's using that energy to actually do the work. The 10 minutes you spend choosing the right filter and writing the perfect caption, she uses that for an extra set at the gym. The mental space you use thinking about how to frame your progress, she uses that to solve problems in her business. The emotional energy you spend managing how people perceive your effort, she redirects into maintaining consistency. She's not performing her workout, she's working out. She's not performing her business, she's building it. She's not performing her growth, she's growing. And 6 months later, when the results are undeniable, people ask, "How did you do it?" And she could tell them the truth. "I stopped posting about it and started doing it. I stopped looking for validation and started looking for results. I stopped performing and started producing." But usually she just smiles and says, "I've been working," because she doesn't need to explain. The results explain themselves. From appearance to achievement. The shift from performing to producing requires changing what you optimize for. Right now, you're optimizing for appearance. How does this look? What will people think? Is this impressive enough to share? Those questions determine your choices. Not what will actually move me forward, but what looks like moving forward. You choose the workout that looks good on camera over the one that's actually effective. You work on the parts of your business that are easy to showcase instead of the hard back-end work that actually matters. You read books you can post about instead of books that would genuinely challenge you. You make choices based on how they'll be perceived, not on whether they'll produce results. This is the performance trap, and it keeps you stuck in a cycle of looking busy without actually getting better. To break free, you have to start optimizing for achievement instead of appearance. Ask different questions. What will actually move me forward? What produces real results? Even if it's not impressive to show. What works even if it's not pretty? This means doing the workout that's effective, not the one that looks good on Instagram. Working on the unglamorous parts of your business that actually generate revenue. Reading books that stretch you, even if no one's heard of them. Making choices based on results, not reactions. And here's what happens when you make that shift. You stop caring about looking productive and start actually being productive. You stop needing to prove you're working and start letting your work prove itself. You stop performing transformation and start experiencing it. The energy cost of curation. Curating your image takes more energy than you realize. Every post requires thought. What should I say? How should I frame this? Which photo represents this best? Is this caption authentic enough or too try-hard? Every comment requires attention. Should I respond? What should I say? How do I sound grateful but not desperate? Every lack of engagement requires emotional processing. Why didn't this get more likes? Did people not care? Am I losing relevance? This is mental and emotional bandwidth. Limited bandwidth that you're spending on managing perception instead of making progress. And it accumulates. Day after day of thinking about how you look instead of what you're doing. Week after week of managing your image instead of improving your reality. Month after month of performing instead of producing. That's hundreds of hours of energy over a year. Energy that could have gone into actual skill development, actual problem solving, actual results. When you stop performing and start producing, you get that energy back. No more time spent crafting posts. That time goes into an extra hour of focused work. No more mental space occupied by engagement metrics. That space becomes available for creative problem solving. No more emotional energy drained by validation seeking. That energy gets redirected into consistent effort. You become more focused, more efficient, more effective, not because you're working harder, because you're not working on the wrong things anymore. The bottom line. Performing is for audiences. Producing is for results. You can't effectively do both. Energy spent on one is energy not spent on the other. External validation creates fragile motivation that disappears when attention fades. Competence creates intrinsic motivation that grows as you improve. She doesn't perform because she's using that energy to produce. While you're curating, she's creating. Optimize for achievement, not appearance. Ask what actually works, not what looks impressive. Curating your image costs more energy than you realize, energy that could be producing results instead of managing perceptions. Stop performing your transformation. Start producing it. Stop posting about the work. Start doing the work. Stop looking for validation that you're on track. Start creating results that prove you are. The world doesn't need another performance. It needs your real transformation. And that transformation happens when you stop caring about being seen and start caring about becoming better. Chapter 4: How Silence Builds Discipline. The Internal Accountability System. Real discipline doesn't need an audience. In fact, it can't be built with one. The discipline that lasts, the kind that shows up when things get hard, when motivation fades, when nobody's checking, is forged in silence. In the private moments when you choose effort over comfort and nobody witnesses it. When you keep a promise to yourself that no one else even knows you made. This is where real strength is built. Not in the public declarations, not in the posted updates, in the quiet consistency when nobody's watching. No crowd stop, no crutch. When you announce your goals, you create a crutch, a psychological safety net made of external pressure. If I tell people I'll have to do it, I won't want to look bad. But that's not discipline, that's fear of judgment. And fear of judgment isn't sustainable. What happens when people stop asking? When the comments slow down? When they forget you even mentioned it? Your crutch disappears. And so does your motivation, because it was never actually yours. Real discipline doesn't depend on who's watching, it depends on who you've decided to be. When you work in silence, you can't use external pressure as a crutch. You can't rely on not wanting to disappoint people to keep you going. You have only yourself. And that limitation is actually liberation, because now you're forced to build something stronger than external pressure, internal commitment. You have to find a reason to show up that has nothing to do with how it looks and everything to do with who you're becoming. You have to develop the ability to keep going when nobody cares. Nobody's checking, and nobody would even know if you quit. That's discipline. Not the performative kind that needs witnesses. The real kind that only needs integrity. The woman who transforms in silence has built this. She doesn't need you to ask about her progress to stay consistent. She doesn't need comments to feel motivated. She doesn't need external validation to keep showing up. She shows up because she said she would. To herself. And that's enough. The quiet grind. The most important moments in your transformation are the ones nobody sees. Not the milestone achievements, not the breakthrough moments, the ordinary days, the unsexy repetition, the quiet grind, the 6 a.m. alarm when it's dark and cold and you don't want to get up, but you do. The evening when you're tired and would rather scroll. But you work on your business instead. The moment you want to skip your routine because nobody would know, but you don't skip it. These moments don't look impressive. They don't feel heroic. There's no drama, no narrative, no story worth telling, but they're everything. Because discipline isn't built in the moments when you feel motivated. It's built in the moments when you don't feel motivated, but you show up anyway. And those moments, they happen in silence, when nobody's cheering, when nobody's witnessing, when it's just you and your commitment. This is where the real work is done. Not in the moments you can post about, in the moments you would never post about because they're too mundane, too simple, too boring. But boring is where discipline lives, in the repetition, in the consistency. In showing up day after day when it's not exciting, not new, not worth sharing. The woman who's transformed her life hasn't done it through dramatic moments. She's done it through 1,000 quiet ones. 1,000 times she chose the hard thing when the easy thing was right there. 1,000 times she kept her word to herself when nobody would have known if she didn't. That's the compound effect of the quiet grind. Small choices, repeated in silence, building something unshakable. Internal scoreboard. When you work in silence, you have to keep your own score. No likes to tell you you're doing well, no comments to validate your effort, no external metrics to measure your progress against. Just you, your goals, and your honest assessment of whether you're actually moving forward. This is uncomfortable at first. Because most of us are used to external scorekeeping. We're used to knowing we're on track because other people tell us we are. But external scorekeeping is unreliable. It's based on other people's attention, which is inconsistent. It's based on what they see, which is incomplete. It's based on their standards, which aren't yours. Internal scorekeeping is different. It's based on your own metrics, your own standards, your own honest evaluation of your effort and progress. Are you showing up consistently? Only you know. Are you pushing yourself or coasting? Only you can tell. Are you actually getting better or just going through the motions? Only you have the data. This forces brutal honesty. You can't lie to yourself when you're the only one keeping score. You can't pretend you're doing the work when you know you're not. But that honesty is what builds real discipline, because now you're accountable to the one person who actually knows the truth, yourself. And over time, something shifts. You stop needing external confirmation that you're on track. You don't need someone to tell you you're making progress because you can see it in your own metrics. You don't need validation that you're working hard because you know how hard you worked. You were there for every early morning, every late night, every moment you chose effort over comfort. This creates a different kind of confidence. Not the fragile kind that comes from likes and comments, the solid kind that comes from knowing, not believing, knowing that you've been consistent, that you've done the work, that you've earned your progress. That confidence can't be shaken by criticism because it's not based on other people's opinions. It can't fade when attention disappears because it was never based on attention in the first place. It's rooted in something deeper, self-respect, the respect that comes from keeping promises to yourself, from showing up when you said you would, from building exactly what you said you'd build. Discipline without documentation. Here's a radical thought. Not everything needs to be documented. Not every workout needs a photo. Not every productive day needs a story. Not every milestone needs an announcement. Some things can just be experienced, accomplished, celebrated, privately. And when you stop feeling the need to document everything, something interesting happens. You start doing things for the right reasons. You work out because it makes you stronger, not because it makes you look dedicated. You read because you want to learn, not because you want to look intellectual. You build your business because you want financial freedom, not because you want to look entrepreneurial. The motivation becomes pure, untainted by the need for external validation, focused entirely on the actual outcome instead of the perception of working toward the outcome. This is freedom, the freedom to pursue goals without performing them, to make progress without proving it, to transform without announcing it. And this freedom creates space for experimentation, for trying things that might not work, for making mistakes you don't have to explain, for adjusting your approach without having to justify why. When you're documenting everything, you're locked into whatever you've shared. You feel pressure to follow through exactly as you described, to meet the timeline you mentioned, to achieve the results you implied. But when you're working in silence, you're free to adapt, to pivot, to learn and adjust as you go. You're not performing a predetermined narrative. You're actually building something. And building something real requires flexibility, iteration, and sometimes changing course entirely. She tracks privately. She has a system, not for showing others, for tracking her own progress. A private journal where she writes down her workouts, not to post, to know if she's actually improving. A spreadsheet where she tracks her business metrics, not to share and to make better decisions. A notebook where she reflects on what's working and what's not to explain, to learn. Her scoreboard is internal, her metrics are private. Her progress is measured against her own standards, not anyone else's. And because of this, she has clarity. She knows exactly where she stands at any moment. She doesn't need to wonder if she's on track because she's been tracking all along, just privately. She celebrates her wins with herself, acknowledges her setbacks to herself, adjusts her strategy based on her own data. And when 6 months have passed and people notice her transformation, she doesn't need to explain how she did it, because she has notebooks full of exactly how she did it. But those notebooks are for her, not for performance, for progress. The bottom line: real discipline doesn't need witnesses. It's built in the private moments when you keep going anyway. External pressure is a crutch. Internal commitment is foundation. You can't build the second if you're leaning on the first. The quiet grind, the boring, unsexy, consistent effort nobody sees, is where transformation actually happens. Internal scorekeeping forces honesty and builds real confidence, the kind based on what you've actually done, not on what people think you've done. Not everything needs documentation. Some things can just be experienced, accomplished, and celebrated privately. Stop needing an audience for your discipline. Build the kind that shows up when nobody's watching, because that's the kind that lasts. That's the kind that creates real results. That's the kind that transforms you from someone who talks about change into someone who actually changes. Work in silence. Build in private. Let your discipline speak through your results, not your posts. Chapter 5. Protecting your vision from doubters. Guard your dreams in silence. Your vision is fragile when it's new, not because it's weak, because it hasn't been tested yet. It hasn't been proven. It exists only in your mind, and that makes it vulnerable. The moment you share it, before you've built evidence, before you've created momentum, before you've developed the confidence that comes from early wins, you expose it to interference. And that interference, even when it comes from people who love you, can kill your dream before you ever give it a real chance. Premature sharing invites doubt. When you share your vision too early, you're not just sharing information. You're opening a door for doubt to walk through. That's going to be hard. Are you sure you're ready for that? What if it doesn't work out? Have you thought about all the things that could go wrong? They think they're being realistic. They think they're helping you prepare. They think they're protecting you from disappointment. But what they're actually doing is projecting their own fears onto your vision. Every question they ask plants a seed of doubt you didn't have before. Every concern they raise highlights a potential obstacle you weren't focused on. Every realistic warning reminds you of the possibility of failure instead of the possibility of success. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start seeing your vision through their lens instead of your own. What felt exciting becomes scary. What felt possible becomes uncertain. What felt like clarity becomes confusion. This isn't because your vision changed. It's because you let other people's limitations contaminate your perspective. When you keep your vision private, at least in the beginning, you protect it from this contamination. You maintain the clarity of your original excitement. You preserve the belief that made you want to pursue this in the first place. Doubt will come. It always does. But it should come from your own honest evaluation of challenges you're facing, not from someone else's fear about challenges they imagine. Not everyone can handle your growth. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. Not everyone in your life wants you to change, not because they're bad people, not because they don't love you, but because your transformation threatens their comfort. When you evolve, it highlights the fact that they're staying the same. When you set boundaries, it challenges the ways they've been treating you. When you pursue ambitious goals, it forces them to confront their own abandoned dreams. Your growth makes them uncomfortable, and discomfort creates resistance. Sometimes that resistance is subtle. You're changing. You're not the same person anymore. Remember when you used to? Sometimes it's disguised as concern. Don't you think you're taking this too seriously? What about balance? You're becoming obsessed. Sometimes it's outright discouragement. That's not realistic for someone like you. People like us don't do things like that. You should be grateful for what you have. None of this is about you. It's about them, about their fear that your evolution will leave them behind, about their discomfort with being reminded of their own stagnation, about their need to keep you in a box that makes sense to them, but you're not responsible for their comfort. You're responsible for your growth. And if you share your vision with people who can't handle your growth, they will, consciously or unconsciously, try to talk you out of it. Not for your benefit, for theirs. This is why silence protects you. When they don't know what you're building, they can't sabotage it. When they don't know where you're headed, they can't convince you to stay where you are. The dream killers. Some people kill dreams without meaning to. They do it through well-meaning advice that's actually rooted in their own limitations. Be realistic translates to dream smaller, so I don't have to confront my own lack of ambition. That's too risky means I'm too afraid to take risks, so you should be too. What if you fail? Really asks, what if you succeed and I have to face the fact that I gave up? You should focus on stability, suggests stay in the safe zone where I am so I don't feel left behind. These statements sound like wisdom. They sound like someone who cares about you trying to protect you from pain, but they're not protection. They're projection. Their fears, their regrets, their limitations, wrapped up as advice and handed to you as if it's truth. And if you're not careful, you'll accept it. You'll absorb their doubts as if they're facts. You'll let their limited vision become your ceiling, but their ceiling doesn't have to be yours. Their fears don't have to become your boundaries. Their abandoned dreams don't have to determine what's possible for you. When you keep your vision to yourself, you shield it from these dream killers. You don't give them the opportunity to plant doubt. You don't invite their realistic assessments that are actually just reflections of their own surrender. You protect the pure form of your vision, the version that exists before other people's fears corrupt it. She keeps her plans to herself. When she decided to pivot her career, she didn't announce it at family dinner. She didn't post about it. She didn't explain her reasoning to friends who would question it. She just started, quietly researching, networking in private, building skills in the background. And when people asked why she was busy, she said, working on some projects, and left it at that. Not because she was being secretive, because she knew that explaining would invite opinions, and opinions would create doubt, and doubt would slow her momentum. She didn't need her family's approval to make a career change. She needed to prove to herself that she could do it. She didn't need her friends' validation of her plan. She needed to execute the plan and see if it worked. She didn't need anyone's permission to pursue what she wanted. She needed to build evidence that it was possible. So she worked in silence, made moves nobody knew about, built skills nobody saw her developing, created opportunities nobody knew she was pursuing. And 6 months later, when she announced her new role, people were shocked. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us you were thinking about this? Because she wasn't thinking about it. She was doing it. And by the time she shared it, it was done. A fact, not a plan. Evidence, not a vision. Nothing to doubt, nothing to question, nothing to talk her out of. Just results. Clear, undeniable, already accomplished results. Guard your vision until it's strong. There's a right time to share your vision. But it's later than you think. It's not when you first get excited about it. That's when it's most vulnerable. It's not when you're planning it. That's when other people's input can derail you. It's not even when you've started working on it. That's when you need to maintain focus without the distraction of managing opinions. The right time is when you have evidence, when you've built something real. When your vision has been tested by reality and survived, when you have results that prove it's possible, progress that demonstrates you're capable, momentum that shows you're committed, at that point, doubt can't touch you. Because you're not asking anyone to believe in a vision anymore, you're showing them a reality. The woman who announces her business after it's profitable doesn't need to convince anyone it's viable. The numbers do that. The woman who shares her fitness transformation after she's already transformed doesn't need to defend her methods. Her body does that. The woman who reveals her career pivot after she's already in the new role doesn't need to justify her choice. Her success does that. This is the power of guarding your vision in silence, not forever, just until it's strong enough to withstand scrutiny. Until it has roots deep enough that other people's doubt can't uproot it. The bottom line: premature sharing invites doubt. Every question plants a seed of uncertainty. Every concern highlights obstacles over opportunities. Protect your vision by keeping it private until you have evidence. Not everyone can handle your growth. Your evolution threatens their comfort. Their resistance isn't about you, it's about their fear of being left behind. Dream killers disguise their projections as advice. Be realistic is code for dream smaller. Their limitations don't have to become your ceiling. She keeps her plans private until they're proven. Builds in silence, shares facts, not visions, results, not plans. Guard your vision until it's strong, until you have evidence, momentum, and results that can speak for themselves. Not everyone deserves access to your dreams. Choose carefully who you let into your vision, or better yet, keep it to yourself until there's nothing left to doubt. Chapter 6. Let your results do the talking actions. Speak, results scream. There comes a point where words become irrelevant, where explanations are unnecessary, where your results say everything your mouth never needs to. This is the ultimate power of silent execution. Not just that you worked in private, but that the work you did speaks so loudly that nobody needs you to say a word. Results promises. Promises are cheap. Anyone can make them. Anyone can say what they're going to do, what they're working toward, what they're committed to achieving. But results are earned. Results require actual effort, actual consistency, actual follow-through. And results don't need explanation, they just exist. Undeniable, verifiable, real. When you announce a goal, you're making a promise. When you achieve a goal, you're presenting a result. The first requires nothing but words. The second requires everything but words. This is why the woman who works in silence ultimately has more credibility than the woman who talks constantly about working. Talk is temporary. It fades. People forget what you said you'd do. They stop paying attention to your updates. They move on. But transformation is permanent. It doesn't fade. it can't be forgotten because it's right there, visible in how you carry yourself, how you look, what you've built, who you've become. You don't have to remind anyone of your transformation. They can see it, and what they can see doesn't need to be explained. The reveal moment. There's something powerful about the reveal moment. The moment when people realize you've completely transformed and they had no idea it was happening. 6 months ago, she looked one way, lived one way, operated one way. Today, she's different, physically, professionally, mentally, and nobody saw it coming. Because while they were watching other people's posted journeys, she was living hers quietly, consistently, without documentation. The reveal moment doesn't need build-up. It doesn't need context. It speaks for itself. Wait, when did you get so fit? How did you build a business without telling anyone? I didn't know you were working on this. These aren't questions that need long answers, because the result is the answer. Princeton researchers studying perception of change found something fascinating. When transformation happens privately, it's perceived as more dramatic and more impressive than when it's documented publicly. Why? Because publicly documented change is expected. You've been watching it happen. You've seen the gradual progression. By the time the transformation is complete, you've already adjusted your mental image. But privately accomplished change is shocking. Your mental image of the person is outdated. And when they reveal the new version, the gap between who you thought they were and who they've become is massive. This is the power of the reveal. It's not just that you transformed, it's that nobody saw it happening, which makes the transformation feel sudden, dramatic, undeniable. And dramatic transformation commands respect in a way that documented transformation never quite does. From explanation to evidence. For most of your life, you've been explaining why you're doing something, explaining how you plan to do it, explaining what you hope to achieve, explaining why it's taking longer than expected, explaining why you had to adjust your approach. And every explanation takes energy, mental bandwidth, time, focus. But when you have results, you don't explain anymore. You just show. No need to defend your methods. The outcome validates them. No need to justify your timeline. The achievement speaks for itself. No need to convince anyone it was worth it. The transformation is proof. This shift from explanation to evidence is liberating. You stop spending energy managing other people's understanding of your process. You stop trying to make your journey make sense to people who aren't on it. You just focus on creating results, and then you present them clean, simple, undeniable. The woman who's been working in silence doesn't need to explain her workout routine when her body has clearly changed. She doesn't need to justify her business strategy when her company is profitable. She doesn't need to defend her choices when her life demonstrably improved because of them. The results are the evidence, and evidence doesn't need explanation. She doesn't talk, she shows. When people ask her how she did it, she doesn't launch into a detailed account of her journey. She doesn't need to. The journey is over. The result is here. So she says something simple. I just stayed consistent. Or I focused on the basics, or I kept showing up. Not because she's being coy, because the specific details of her process don't matter to them. They're not going to replicate her exact approach anyway. What matters is the result. And the result is visible. Lost 30 pounds without posting a single gym selfie, built a 6-figure business without announcing she was starting one. Wrote a book without sharing that she was writing. The results appeared. The questions followed. But by then, there was nothing to doubt, nothing to question, nothing to advise on. Just facts, accomplished facts. This is strategic silence at its finest. Not hiding the work, just not broadcasting it until it's done. And when it's done, letting it speak for itself. The transformation speaks. Real transformation doesn't need a narrator. It doesn't need captions. It doesn't need context. It's visible in how you move, how you speak, how you handle challenges, how you carry yourself. People who haven't seen you in 6 months notice immediately, not because you told them. Because they can see it. The confidence is different, the energy is different, the presence is different. This isn't something you can fake. You can't post your way into this kind of transformation. You can't perform this level of change. It only comes from actually doing the work consistently, over time, in silence. And when it shows up, it's undeniable. Nobody questions whether you really changed. They can see that you did. Nobody asks if you stayed committed. Your results prove you did. Nobody wonders if the effort was worth it. The transformation answers that question. This is the ultimate validation, not the kind that comes from comments and likes, the kind that comes from reality. You set out to transform. You worked in silence, and now the transformation is real, tangible, visible to everyone. That's worth more than any number of supportive comments on a post ever could be. Compound credibility. Here's something most people don't realize. When you transform in silence, you build credibility that lasts. The person who posts every step of their journey, people remember the process, the struggles, the setbacks, the moments of doubt. The person who reveals the result, people remember the transformation, the accomplishment, the proof that it's possible. This compounds over time. Do it once, transform in silence, reveal results, and people notice. Do it twice, in different areas of your life, and people start to see a pattern. Do it 3 times. Fitness, career, personal development, and you've built a reputation. Not as someone who talks about change, as someone who creates it. Not as someone who's always starting, as someone who finishes. Not as someone who needs support to stay committed. As someone who clearly has internal drive that doesn't require external validation. This reputation is powerful. It opens doors. It creates opportunities. It commands respect. And you built it entirely through results, not through self-promotion. The bottom line promises are cheap. Results are earned. Results don't need explanation. They just exist, undeniable and real. The reveal moment, when transformation is discovered rather than documented, is more powerful because the gap between expectation and reality is dramatic. Evidence replaces explanation. When you have results, you don't justify, defend, or convince. You just show. She shows, doesn't tell. The work is done. The result is visible. That's enough. Real transformation is visible in how you move, speak, and carry yourself. It can't be faked through posts. It only comes from actual work. Transforming in silence builds compound credibility, not as someone who talks about change, but as someone who creates it. Stop explaining what you're going to do. Start creating results that speak for themselves. Work in silence. Transform in private. And when the time is right, let your results do all the talking, because what you've built speaks louder than anything you could ever say. Chapter 7. The Compound Effect of Silent Work. Small moves, big wins. The most powerful changes don't look powerful while they're happening. They look small, insignificant, not worth mentioning. 1 workout, 1 focused work session, 1 healthy meal, 1 early morning, 1 book chapter, 1 difficult conversation. None of these feel transformative in the moment. None of them seem worth sharing. None of them appear to be changing your life, but they are. Slowly, invisibly, inevitably. This is the compound effect, and it works best in silence. Daily effort compounds in silence. When you work out once, your body doesn't transform. When you eat healthy for one day, your health doesn't revolutionize. When you work on your business for 1 hour, your revenue doesn't explode. A one day doesn't move the needle visibly, which is why most people quit, because they can't see immediate results. But here's what's actually happening. That one workout created microscopic tears in your muscle fibers that will rebuild stronger. That one healthy meal gave your body nutrients it needed to function better. That one focused hour moved your business forward in ways you won't see for weeks. The effect is real. It's just invisible at first. Now multiply that by 180 days. 1 hour daily for 6 months equals 180 hours of focused effort. That's enough to learn a new skill, build a significant portion of a business, completely transform your body, or develop a habit that changes your entire life trajectory. But nobody sees those 180 individual hours. They just see the 6-month result, and it looks sudden, dramatic, like it happened overnight. It didn't. It happened one invisible day at a time, in silence, with nobody watching, nobody commenting, nobody validating. The compound effect only works when you trust the process enough to keep going even when you can't see the progress yet. And silence protects that trust. Because when you're not sharing every step, you're not looking for validation at every stage. You're just accumulating effort, letting it build, trusting that small actions, repeated consistently, create massive results. Consistency without witnesses. The hardest kind of consistency is the kind nobody sees. When you post your workout, you get instant feedback, likes, comments, keep going. That external validation makes it easier to show up tomorrow. But when you work out in silence, no instant feedback, no validation, no external reminder that you're doing something worthwhile, just you and the choice. Show up or don't. Keep your commitment or break it, and nobody would know either way. This is where real discipline is forged. Not in the moments when people are watching and you want to look committed, but in the moments when nobody's watching and you have to actually be committed. The 6 a.m. workout when nobody knows you're even awake. The late night work session when everyone else is scrolling. The meal prep on Sunday when you could be doing literally anything else. The book you read instead of the show you want to watch. These moments don't get celebrated, they don't get recognized, they don't earn you any social credit, but they compound into strength, into skill, into results, into the kind of person who doesn't need external validation to do what needs to be done. And when those results finally become visible, when the 180 invisible hours reveal themselves in undeniable transformation, people will wonder how you did it, but you'll know you did it in the moments nobody saw, the moments that didn't look impressive, the moments when consistency without witnesses created the foundation for results with impact. The tipping point. Compound growth doesn't follow a straight line. It's slow at first, almost imperceptibly slow, then it accelerates, then it explodes. Month 1 of working out in silence, barely any visible change. You might feel slightly better, but nobody else notices. Month 2, you notice small differences. Your clothes fit a bit differently. You have more energy, but it's still subtle. Month 3, this is where it tips. The accumulated effort reaches critical mass. The changes become undeniable. People start asking what you've been doing. But here's the key. Most people quit before month 3 because month 1 and 2 don't look like progress to the outside world. And if you're dependent on external validation to keep going, you won't make it to the tipping point. But when you work in silence, you're not waiting for external markers of progress. You're tracking internal ones. You know you showed up 60 times in 2 months. You know you're lifting heavier than week 1. You know you're getting faster, you know the work is accumulating, so you keep going through the invisible stage, through the slow build, until you hit the tipping point. And when you do, the results arrive all at once. Not because the transformation was sudden, because invisible progress finally became visible progress. This is why silent work is powerful. It gives you the patience to get to the tipping point, to keep accumulating effort even when nobody can see it paying off yet. Trust the unseen process. The hardest part of silent work is trusting what you can't see. You can't see muscle building fiber by fiber. You can't see your brain creating new neural pathways. You can't see skills developing gradually. You can't see momentum building beneath the surface. But it's happening. Every single day you show up, every rep, every page, every focused hour. The results aren't visible yet, but the process is working. This requires a different kind of faith than most people have. Not faith that you'll succeed. Faith that consistent effort in the right direction will eventually produce results, even when you can't see them accumulating. It's like compound interest in a savings account. You don't see your money growing daily, but you trust that the interest is accumulating, that in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, the compound effect will be undeniable. Your effort compounds the same way, not dramatically, not visibly, but reliably. 1 day of effort, barely noticeable growth. 100 days of effort, foundation is built. 365 days of effort, so our transformation is undeniable. But you have to trust the process long enough to get there. And silence makes that easier because you're not comparing your day 10 progress to someone else's day 365 results. You're just focused on your process, your consistency, your accumulation of small efforts that will eventually become big results. The bottom line. The compound effect works best in silence. Small, daily efforts that don't look impressive individually create dramatic results collectively. 1 hour daily for 6 months equals 180 hours of focused work, enough to completely transform an area of your life. But nobody sees the 180 individual hours, just the 6-month result. Consistency without witnesses is the hardest kind. It's also where real discipline is forged. When you keep showing up with no external validation. The tipping point comes after the slow build. Most people quit before month 3 because they can't see progress. Silent workers get to the tipping point because they're not waiting for external markers. Trust the unseen process. Results aren't visible daily, but they're accumulating. Consistent effort in the right direction eventually produces undeniable transformation. Work in silence, compound in private, and when the tipping point arrives, let your results speak. Because what you built, one invisible day at a time, will eventually become impossible to ignore. Chapter 8. The New You, Silent and Unstoppable. Living Your Quiet Power. You've reached the end of this book, but you're standing at the beginning of something far more important, a completely different way of building your life. Never tell people what you do. Focus in silence, win in public. This isn't just a strategy. It's a transformation in how you operate, how you think, how you move through the world. The question isn't whether this approach works. You know it does. You've seen the science. You've understood the mechanics. You've recognized the pattern in every woman who's transformed seemingly overnight. The only question is, are you ready to become her? Who you become. You're not becoming someone who hides. You're becoming someone who's strategic, not secretive, selective about what deserves your energy. Selective about who gets access to your vision. Selective about when to share and when to protect. You're not becoming antisocial. You're becoming focused. You still have relationships. You still connect. You just don't confuse connection with constant updating. You don't mistake sharing for intimacy. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming powerful. The kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that shows up in your results, your presence, your quiet confidence. The old you needed validation to feel motivated. The new you generates motivation internally. The old you measured progress by likes and comments. The new you measures progress by actual metrics that matter. The old you performed transformation. The new you produces it. This shift isn't about becoming someone different. It's about becoming who you actually are when you're not performing for an audience. What changes? Your relationship with your phone changes. You stop checking it compulsively. Stop refreshing for notifications. Stop measuring your self-worth by engagement metrics, because your sense of progress no longer comes from external validation. It comes from internal knowing. You know when you've had a good day. You know when you've done the work. You don't need anyone else to confirm it. Your energy increases dramatically because you're no longer draining it into explanation, justification, and image management. All that bandwidth you used to spend on posting, responding to comments, and thinking about how you look, it's now available for actual work, for solving problems, for creating, for building. Your discipline strengthens. When external pressure isn't propping you up, you develop real internal commitment, the kind that shows up on day 200 as consistently as it did on day 1. Your confidence transforms, not the fragile kind, based on whether people liked your post, the solid kind based on knowing, actually knowing that you've been consistent, that you've done hard things, that you've proven to yourself you can be trusted. Your relationships improve because you're no longer performing your life, you can actually live it. You're present, authentic, not thinking about how this moment would look on social media, just experiencing it. And most importantly, your results compound because 100% of your effort goes into progress instead of performance. The daily practice. This isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Every morning, you wake up and choose silence over sharing, action over announcement, production over performance. Morning. You have a goal. You don't post about it. You don't tell anyone what you're planning to do today. You just start doing it. Throughout the day, you catch yourself wanting to share, wanting to update, wanting that dopamine hit from announcing progress, and you redirect. You put that energy into one more rep, one more focused hour, one more step forward. Evening. You reflect privately. Did you do what you said you'd do? Only you know, only you need to know. You track your own progress. You hold yourself accountable. You celebrate your wins internally. This becomes automatic over time, but at first it requires conscious choice. Choosing silence when sharing would be easier. Choosing internal accountability when external validation would feel better. But every time you make that choice, you strengthen the pattern, and the pattern becomes who you are. From talker to builder. The transformation from talker to builder doesn't happen overnight. It happens in stages. Week 1. It's hard, really hard. You want to share. Your brain craves the dopamine of announcing. You feel like you're hiding something. You have to actively choose silence multiple times a day. Week 4. It's getting easier. You notice you're thinking less about posting. The urge to share is still there, but it's not as strong. You're starting to enjoy the privacy, the protected space where you can just work without managing perception. Week 8. You catch yourself not even thinking about posting. You finish a workout and just move on with your day. You have a productive work session, and the thought of updating anyone doesn't even cross your mind. The silence is becoming natural. Month 6. Someone comments on your transformation. When did this happen? And you realize you've been working so quietly that even you forgot you weren't sharing. The work became its own reward. The progress became its own motivation. This is when you know the shift is complete. When silence isn't a strategy you're employing, it's just how you operate now. Your silent power. The woman who works in silence has a specific kind of power. People can feel it even if they can't name it. She doesn't need to talk about what she's doing because her results speak. She doesn't need to prove she's committed because her consistency demonstrates it. She doesn't need to convince anyone of her capability because her achievements verify it. She moves differently, talks differently, carries herself differently, not because she's trying to project confidence, because she has the real thing, built in private, earned through work nobody saw. She has clarity that comes from not being confused by everyone else's input, focus that comes from not being distracted by constant sharing, strength that comes from discipline that doesn't need witnesses, and when people ask her secret, she smiles, because there is no secret, just silence, just work, just results. She could tell them everything you've learned in this book, about the dopamine trap, about energy leakage, about internal accountability, about the compound effect of silent work. But usually, she just says, I stopped talking about it and started doing it. And that's all they need to hear. The choice is yours every moment. You have a choice. Post or work, announce or act, perform or produce. The posting, announcing, and performing will feel good in the moment. Your brain will reward you for it. You'll get your dopamine hit. You'll feel like you've accomplished something. But 6 months from now, when you look back, what will you have? A feed full of intentions and a life that hasn't changed, or a private journey in a transformed reality? The choice compounds. Every time you choose silence over sharing, you're investing in your actual future instead of your perceived present. Every time you choose action over announcement, you're building something real instead of something that looks real. Every time you choose to work instead of to post about working, you're becoming the woman who actually transforms instead of the woman who talks about transforming. This choice is entirely yours. Nobody can make it for you. Nobody can force you to work in silence. Nobody can stop you from sharing if that's what you want to do. But you know now what each path creates, and you get to decide which one you want. The final truth. Remember that Instagram post from the beginning? Starting my fitness journey. The likes, the comments, the validation, the motivation that lasted 3 weeks before disappearing completely. You don't need to post this time. In fact, you won't, because you understand now what posting does, how it tricks your brain, how it leaks your energy, how it creates fragile motivation that fades with the attention. You know better now, so you just start, quietly, without announcement, without needing anyone to witness it. And 6 months from now, when they ask, what's your secret? When did this happen? How did you transform so completely? You'll know the truth. There is no secret, just silence, just consistency, just work that nobody saw until it became results nobody could ignore. You didn't tell people what you were doing, you focused in silence. And you won in public, not because you needed to prove anything to them, because you proved everything to yourself. The new you doesn't need an audience, doesn't need validation, doesn't need permission. The new you just needs a goal, a commitment, and the discipline to keep showing up when nobody's watching. That's the power of silence. That's the strength of private execution. That's the transformation you've been seeking. It was never about being seen. It was about becoming real. And real transformation, the kind that lasts, the kind that changes everything, only happens when you stop performing and start producing. Never tell people what you do. Focus in silence. Win in public. The new you starts now, quietly, powerfully, unstoppably. What are you going to build?